Good morning. Um, Welcome to the last of the webinars in our basics series. This is Practical Project Management, Running the Gamut. Sorry for the slight delay. We had some technical issues, but we're live and ready to go. I think I have something hanging over the edge. There we go. Okay. So, for anyone who hasn't been to one of our webinars before, we'll start out, as always, with a little information about me so you have an idea that I actually know what I'm talking about. My name is Kim Wasson. My education is that I have a bachelor's from Cal State and a master's from Stanford. I have held positions from line engineer to vice president at companies as big as IBM and as small as brand new startups. And I have used project management concepts and tools in every one of those positions at every one of those companies. I started Ivy Bay Consulting 10 years ago. My specialties are tailored solutions for project and program management, and I do coaching in that. I untangle messy projects. I do process improvement and analysis. I help folks with time management, and I work pretty extensively with distributed and international teams. And you can see more about what I do, get more info, hints, blog posts, on my website at www.ivybay.com. Okay, what shall we talk about today? We're going to take one project plan from beginning to end using all the things that we've talked about in the webinar series. That means we're going to start with our goals and a vision. We'll check out assumptions on the project, set the 4 dials, put together a task list and break it down, understand what resources we need for the project, how much time is required and what calendar we're going to use, what the dependencies between the tasks are, get a schedule, and we're going to manage a change to the project. So that's pretty much it. Let's begin. Here's the project we're going to be taking on. I am ready to buy a new car. And my spouse and I are ready to get to work on this. Now, interestingly enough, I put this together thinking that everyone would understand the basic concepts, of course, and that it would be useful to me in a few years when I plan to buy a car, but circumstances dictated that my husband and I needed to buy a car rather suddenly. So I actually used this. It's real live and it is helpful. So don't get too hung up on the individual steps in here. I will certainly attest to the fact that they might not be exactly what's here anymore, but we're going to walk through it. Sadly, this is not the car that we got. What are the goals of a project? Remember, that's where we start. We begin with the end in mind, understand what it is that we're trying to do. We want a fuel-efficient car. It needs to be comfortable. We do a lot of commuting. It has to be reliable. And we're going to trade in or sell the current vehicle. Pretty straightforward. So, a vision. Just something to keep in mind to guide us. This is actually what we ended up with. So I changed the presentation yesterday to put that in there. But remember that the vision is important. If you can put the goal into pictures, it's going to be easier to focus on that. So my spouse and I sit down, we start to figure out what our assumptions are. We're going to put down 20% and be able to finance the rest at a reasonable rate. We would like to get a plug-in hybrid. This car is going to be primarily mine, not my spouse's, so there are parts of it where my preferences may take precedence. We're going to finance through the credit union unless we can get a better rate from the dealer. And that we can get some fleet pricing or something like that through AAA or Consumer Reports, something where it makes it a little easier to deal with car dealerships and we get a discount without having to spend the afternoon bargaining. So that's our assumptions. Remember that assumptions can really drive the project, so it's very important to get them out. into the open to discover them as early as possible, preferably right at the beginning of the project. So our next step is to set our forward dials. Remember, this is keep the big picture in mind, understand the project parameters. So our goal, schedule is a goal. We don't have a fixed schedule for this particular project. We'd like to get it done in a month. But content or portions of the content are quite fixed. It's got to get excellent mileage, and we can't use an electric only. Not enough range. We have a goal. We're thinking $40,000 range, but the quality is fixed. It has to be highly reliable, and for that we will use our Buying Bible consumer reports. So that's kind of the big picture of the project. We've got it in mind. Now that we know that, we can start to look at what the major tasks are. Now, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is order when you're putting together the major tasks. Usually you're going to set them up in the order you think you're going to do them, but that's not really required. What's really required at the beginning is that you know what all the tasks are. You can sort them out when you actually put your project plan together. So what are our major tasks? We need a budget. We have our kind of goal parameters, but we actually need a budget. We would like to have a loan pre-approved so we can walk into a dealership knowing what we've got from a credit union, our credit union. We're going to research fuel-efficient cars. That may seem a little backwards, but again, this is not necessarily in order. Once we do our research, though, we're going to have a top 5 hit list, the top 5 that we're interested in. Once we have those, we're going to do some reliability research. So these two are kind of dependent, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the schedule. And then we're going to have our list of options. What do we want to have on this car? We'll do some preliminary costing. Once we have our options list, we know how much those things cost. We're going to test drive everything. Then we are going to buy the car or order a car, whatever it takes, and we're going to get rid of the old car. So that's our major task list. Now we're going to break that down. And this is where some kind of new concepts come in when we're working with something real world. But let's start with budget. Okay, we're just going to do kind of generic fuel efficient car. What are we looking at here? We are going to figure out what the old car is worth. We're going to figure out, we have some balancing that we want to do here. We want to balance interest rates, which are not as big a deal when you're buying a car, right? Because it's only a few years. Interest rates for 5 and 6 year loans. We also want to look at the payments because we need to work those into our budget. And then we're going to go for the loan pre-approval. What do we do for that? Well, we apply for the loan. And then we have to wait and see if it's approved. Then we're going to research fuel-efficient cars. Now, you can see that some of this, and you will see this throughout the plan, we loop back. And that's a reality when you're doing real-world projects. It's not always possible in a corporate setting unless you're using a methodology that specifically is geared to deal with getting information and being allowed to go back and change particular pieces that you've already worked on. There are formal methodologies that do that we'll go into in our advanced series. But you can do this in a minor way for any project. And some projects you really, really have to do that to be the most efficient and the most effective. Remember, we talked about effectiveness versus efficiency. And so we're going to look at one aspect of fuel efficient cars. What do they cost? And then we're going to actually research them specifically. So when we research them, we're going to look on the web, see what we can find. We're going to check our consumer reports lists. And then we're going to generate a list of the fuel efficient cars. Once we have this big old list, we're going to come up with 5 options. What are our top 5? And then we're going to do reliability research. How are we going to do that? again, Consumer Reports, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to talk to our mechanic. And then this option list is the top 5 options. So this is one of those loop back and make updates. We could look at the reliability for every fuel efficient car out there. That is not very efficient. It's much more efficient to get the big list, narrow it down, and then do deeper research. So that's where these trade-offs come in, and that's where you loop around a little bit in the real world. Now, this options list is, you know, do we want a spoiler on it? Do we want fog lights? That kind of thing. So to do that, we got to figure out what options are available. So we're going to search on the web. We will check on Consumer Reports because they have a lot of that information, and they actually will tell you which ones make sense. And we'll look at car sites, J.D. Powers and Edwards and things like that. And once we have that, we're going to do a Moscow rating. Remember the Moscow rating? Must, should, could, won't. So we can narrow down this option list because every vehicle is not going to have every option, and we need to know what it is we absolutely can't live without. Preliminary costings. Now we have our top 5. We know what options we want. And we're going to check AAA for this fleet option for those top 5. And Consumer Reports has the same kind of a buying service. Now, should you actually use this, use caution, because you start getting calls from dealerships once you use either of these options. But that's what we got in our plan. Then we're going to see what kind of packages are available, both financing packages and options packages, because they have specials at the dealers for that. And then we're going to get a price range for each of our top 5. And we will update our top 5 list as necessary. At this point, we may find that some of them are out of the range that we want. Then we're going to test drive. So we want our list before we start test driving. Then we're going to go out actually to the dealers. This is kind of an interesting step, and I have it here because once many years ago, I was absolutely convinced I wanted a Mazda 6, got in that thing as a stick shift and could not put the seat far enough forward to work the pedals. So test drives, very important step. We're going to buy or order the car. So that means after we've test driven, we need to figure out which one we want. We're going to figure out how we're going to do it. Are we going to go direct? We're going to do AAA, Consumer Reports. We're going to look at the current discounts and incentives so we can walk in prepared. And we're going to actually buy the car. And we also are going to get rid of the old car. This task breakdown, now you can start to see where your task breakdown is going to give you some important ordering information. We're going to get the Blue Book value and the trade-in value. And we're going to decide whether we're going to trade, sell, or donate, and then execute on that option. But you can see if we actually didn't do this until we bought the new car, then we would absolutely, we'd be eliminating one of these because we wouldn't be able to trade it in. So you see that we have to make that decision before we actually go and get the car. And then we're going to update our insurance. So now we have our task list. Actually, let's look at this. Here we have a project plan. You see we've put it all in. Remember how this goes? We can expand or not the tasks to our subtasks. None of the rest of this is making any sense right now, but we have our tasks. If nothing else, we can take this out and use it as a checklist. So this is a nice way to start, even if you don't use anything else. So now we've got our tasks all in and ready to go. And we're going to think about resources. Well, I'm a resource, and my spouse is a resource. Consumer Reports, obviously, is a resource. The internet and all these sites. I didn't list all the sites that we might do because we're going to do kind of random searches and see what we come up with. Kelley Blue Book, which is actually on the internet. Credit union application. And sadly, the car dealers. Now, I didn't put all the resources into the project plan. I only put my spouse and myself, because the other ones are not scarce resources. We can get to those anywhere. So here's our calendar. We're going to assume that we're going to spend 2 hours per day per person on every weekday, and then 6 hours per day per person on weekends. We're really going to devote our time to getting this thing done. Part of that is because, and this is something that you really need to consider when you're setting up your calendar, is that some of the information is very time sensitive. Models come and go, deals come and go, financing comes and goes. Once you get that pre-approved loan, you have a clock for when you can use it. So the calendar, how much time that you're willing to devote to a project, can be very important. There are some projects where it maybe is not so important, but this is very important. So there's our calendar. Now we're going for durations. Remember, how we want to think is, how long is it going to take? And this is not in calendar time, which is pretty obvious because these are hours. But when you think about durations for your project plan, you think about not elapsed time, but actual time spent, right? So we have, both of us need to research the prices, or both of us are going to research the prices. Both of us don't need to, but there are some tasks where more than one person needs to work on it. Only one person needs to determine the blue book value of the old car. We're going to look at the interest rates. We're going to apply for a credit union loan. That's going to be one person. We're figuring it's going to take an hour, and assume that we're going to get news back on that within a week. We think our web searches, we're both going to do this, although it's not a requirement that we both do it, but we are both going to. Consumer reports an hour. We have to work together to generate our list, because we both have to have input and we both have to approve that. So that's going to be really important. So that kind of thought process is very important, because as you change things, as things come up, as conditions change, you want to know which things don't have to be done by 2 people, which things could just stretch out, especially if schedule is not a fixed dial. So, when we're executing this, if one of us suddenly has a work crisis and we're working a lot of hours, the other person will probably pick up the slack. It doesn't take 2 people, don't have to work on the web searches, but the whole thing is going to come to a halt until both of us can work here on generating this list. Same with the top 5. Both of us need to do that. Reliability research, one person can do this stuff, but again, both of us have to be there to update the option list. So more on the option list. For the most part, it's one person. 2 people are going to look at car sites, but they don't have to. But both of us have to be involved in the Moscow ratings. Preliminary costing, again, the research doesn't have to be 2 people, but we'd like it to be. We're gaining efficiencies there because we're both doing it. And then, but updating the list does require 2 people. Now, okay, test drive does require 2 people. We'll talk a little bit about durations in the project plan, because that's a good thing to look at. Buying or ordering the car, both of us have to figure out what we're going to go for. Both of us will need to figure out how we're going to do it. Both of us need to look at the current discounts and incentives. Actually, that's not true. One of us could do this. We're going to go quicker if both of us do it. But it takes 2 of us to go buy the car. Getting rid of the old car, the only thing that requires both of us is to make that decision. And then one person can update the insurance. So I think that's everything. Let's look at durations. When we get to assignments, we'll talk about what you do if you have to change. So here we have durations. We have no dependencies, right? So everything just kind of can start and it looks like it can go together, which, as we know, is not really the case. But now we have our estimates in here. Remember, we just put the estimates in for these. We're going to talk a little bit about ways to work on this, because this isn't actually taking a week of work. This is just taking a week of elapsed time. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But there are durations in our project plan. Let's talk about assignments. Let me go. Okay, so my spouse and I are going to research the prices. My spouse is going to look at the Blue Book value. I'm going to look at interest rates. I'm going to apply for the credit union loan. And let me explain something else about this, because it may look a little odd to you applying for a loan without knowing what the cost is. But with the credit union, they actually will handle car loans very much like house loans. They you can apply for a certain amount, but they will tell you the maximum amount that you're approved for. And so, you can get things set up for the amount you think you're going to pay, but it's not a problem to go up, and it helps with your parameters. So that's the credit union stuff. Now remember, we put these out there. You can play some games with this once you get it into your calendar. If it looks like you're going to make better progress with a different person doing it, and that different person has the same skill set and is available in the same time frame, you can start moving things around that way. We're both doing web searches. I'm going to do the consumer reports because I just love consumer reports. Two of us have to generate the list. The two of us have to come up with the top 5. Again, I'm going to do the reliability research, but my spouse is going to talk to my mechanic. And remember, these things can be done concurrently, and neither of these require any special skills, so we can trade off. Whoever's driving to work and passes by the mechanic shop, that's the person who's going to do it, for example. And then, of course, both of us need to update the option list. This is pretty easy when you only have 2 resources, right? I'm going to do web searches. My spouse gets to do consumer reports for the auctions list. We're going to look at car sites, and we'll sit down to do the Moscow rating. We're going to trade off, one of us doing AAA, one of us doing consumer reports. We will both research the available packages and determine the price range, and then we have to sit down together to do the list. We'll both do the test drives, and then we're both deciding what we're going to do and actually buying the car. And then since my spouse already checked out the Blue Book value, he'll double check for the old car, and I'll check the trade-in value, which, by the way, you actually do at the same time on the Kelly Blue Book site. We decide together to donate it, and I'm going to deal with getting rid of it while my spouse will deal with insurance. So there are all our assignments. And here we go. There are 2 ways to do this waiting for the confirm approval. I've just put me in at 5% for a week, right? There's a better way to do that I'm going to show you, but that's one way to do it. And that's also, we could put research prices here at 6 hours. No, we could do it at 3 hours and put me at 50% and my spouse at 50%. So let me show you what this looks like when you put the percentage in. Well, we have our 5% on approval predecessors resources. Right here, I've got me in, sorry, it's a little difficult to see, me in at 5%. So you can play around with that. I think I put the calendar into the last one. So let's go back. So there are all our assignments. So now, again, this is not giving me anything because there aren't really any dependencies set. But this part here, this is good. We can take this and run with it. Dependencies. A lot of these things don't have any dependencies. You could do them, we could do them anytime. But we're not going to apply for a credit union loan until we have some idea of what these prices are. And we can't confirm the approval, of course, until we apply for the loan. We're not going to generate our big list of research of the fuel efficient cars until we've finished our web searches and consumer reports. But notice that these say FF, that's finish to finish. Remember, we talked about that kind of dependency, because we can start putting things on the list as we go through the web searches, as we go through our consumer reports list. We can start putting our list together, but that list is not going to finish until we finish all the web searches. So we've got this finish to finish dependencies. And of course, we can't come up with the top 5 on our list until we have the list. And we're going to do the rest of our research dependent on the top 5. And then we're going to update them, again, finish to finish. We talk to our mechanic and we find out one of those top 5 is something that he sees a whole lot of because they've got problems. We may be updating that list as we go. Same with consumer reports. We may be throwing stuff off that list because they've got little black bubbles all over the place in the reliability. So, so we can do these finish to finish dependencies. The options list, really these things can go on at the same time, but we're not going to do the Moscow rating until we have the list. There really is no point in doing that while we're building the list, because it will be very inefficient to be trying to do that. So again, efficiency, effectiveness. Preliminary costing, we need to know what we're looking for. And then when we get the price range, we actually need to have finished doing these 3. And then updating, we're going to update that list. So there's this looping back again. Remember, that list, it's kind of a moving target as more information comes in. We've put them in as separate tasks in this project plan. There are methodologies where you don't have to do that. Okay, and then test drive, we have to have our list that we're going to be test driving. After we do the test drive, we're going to figure out what to buy, and once we figure out what to buy, we can figure out how we're going to do that. And once we do all of this research, then we're going to go buy the car. Actually, what I didn't put here, but I do have, now it's important, so I want to tell you about it. Before we buy the car, oh, there we do have it in here. We're going to decide what to do with the old car. Even though that comes after it on the project plan list, it doesn't matter. It's still a dependency. So now let's look at our dependency list. Now we have a schedule. Now here is the other way. I wanted to show you this. This is, remember, the approval that we're going to confirm, and I had it in before at 5%, but this is actually a better way to do it. I want to show you as much as I can so you can figure out how you want to manage things. What I have on this for general is it only takes half an hour to confirm the approval. Probably less than that, but I really didn't want to get into minutes in a project plan. It's dependent on applying for the loan. It's a finish to start, so we have to have applied to for the loan before we can do this, and then I put in a lag. Right there. I got a week in between the finish of applying for the loan and the start of this. So that's how that's really the easiest way to manage any of this. Now, one of the things that I did for this, remember we talked about this. It's not what we want to do. We want to look at our project, and we want to look at this. Okay, so this is working on a standard project calendar, but I set up a car buying calendar that has us, this should be working on the weekends. Still didn't do it. Well, I have no idea why Microsoft Project is doing this to me. Well, anyway, that would be what you would do if Microsoft Project were cooperating. Anyway, so now we have our dependencies. You can see I've got all these resources. We've got them scheduled out. Let's getting rid of the old car. Here we go. Let's see, we've got this. This is our long haul, just executing the option on getting rid of the old car. Although, of course, if we were trading that in, that execute option is going to be much smaller. So that's kind of our entire Gantt chart. Who's going to do what, how long it's going to take. Once we have our dependencies in, we can start playing with stuff. We can change who's doing what for the ones that don't require to, meaning the spouse now. We can change our duration. We can change who's doing what for how long. And the how long is going to depend on the calendar. When the calendar is working correctly, we have 2 hours a day plus 6 during the week and 6 hours on the weekends. So if I say 5% of that, that's going to be a very small amount. Or I can change it in the calendar, assuming that it's working, if one of us is suddenly having a work crisis. Right, I can change those working hours to much smaller by person using Microsoft Project. So you have a lot of options to run through here. Now we've got this all together. Let's figure out how we manage a change. We talked a little bit about change management in the advanced. In our advanced curriculum, we do actually a lot more about change management. But let's say suddenly we find that it doesn't take a week, it takes 10 days to get pre-approval from the credit union. So what are you going to do? There's not a lot of dependency on this. There's some. It is going to push the schedule out, but schedule is not a fixed dial. So so we can relax a little about it. Managing this change might be very different if the fixed dial, if schedule is a fixed dial, we might change some things. We might opt to increase risk and remove some dependencies. We might opt to go out and do our research and actually test drive while we're waiting to get this pre-approval. We might do all of that kind of stuff just to make sure that we make our schedule, because that's a fixed dial. It's not a fixed dial here. So this is pretty easy, but when we want to see what's going to happen, we will go, where are we? Nope, that's not going to give us everything. We're going to look at dependencies. So confirm approval. We have it at 1 week. It's very easy. We just say, now we want it at 2 weeks. Now the schedule pushes out. So that wasn't too difficult. Now, let's assume we're doing our test drives on a big sale weekend, like the one coming up. Labor Day weekend's coming up. It's a big sale. You got some great potential to make deals, to save some money on this, to get good financing rates, but they're going to be packed. So so it's going to take longer than you figured. So in this case, part of what you adjust are your expectations, right? And your schedule, right? So we're not really schedule driven, but even so, to take advantage of deals on Labor Day weekend, we probably want to just spend more time on it. This is kind of the overtime question when you're working in a corporate environment. When is it going to be worth it to put in more time than you expected to put in? Now, you may have other plans that can't be changed, in which case, if you can see this coming up, you have a nice project plan, maybe you spend a little more time before that getting everything ready so you can do your test drives and just go in and buy. You make those adjustments based on sometimes factors external to the project, and that's okay. That's what change management is. So there are some other things that may go into this. If you are having a Labor Day picnic and you've got this schedule, you see that it's going to be Labor Day, there's going to be a lot of stuff, then maybe the weekend before, you spend the whole weekend doing test drives, and you go in Friday night, or you expect that Saturday, you're going to try to get in there Saturday, even though normally you'd be prepping for this picnic that you're going to have, or this barbecue you're going to have, or whatever it is. You take on that risk. You take on the risk that your bathroom's not going to be clean, so you save a couple $1,000s on your new car. So all of that, there's risk management, there are risk trade-offs and assessments. Again, those are kind of advanced concepts that we'll explore in more depth with the in the advanced webinars. But you can get a taste of it here, and you can see how it applies really to a very, very straightforward everyday project. Still has changes, it still has risks, it still has loop backs, it still has trade-offs between efficiency and effectiveness. So all of those things happen, and actually what you find is you probably are doing this on things like buying a car day to day, but you're not recording it and you don't have a plan, so you're probably not as effective with it as you could be if you were thinking about it specifically. So I've got homework for you, just so that you can try it. Try to cement these things. Try it with a small project. If you have something around the house, try to put together a little project plan for it. It's pretty straightforward. Do it with something small. What you want to do is you want to test the concepts to see how they apply, to check your understanding, but you don't want it to be on anything critical, because that's just really stressful, and you'll end up probably discarding it because it's new stuff and it's going to get in the way of something critical until you really have a chance to cement it. And that's what this small project will do. If you're having trouble thinking of a small project, try this one. Plan a wedding anniversary party. Your parents, your friends, your sisters, a surprise party for their wedding anniversary. Try just on paper planning that and putting it together and see how that goes. If you don't have a tool available to check out the project management stuff, we did talk a lot about tools, but remember ViewPath has a free account. So do that, or do one of the other online project management systems that have a free version, so that you can just try setting it in, setting up your dependencies, and seeing how it works. So what do we want to remember out of this? This is kind of what you want to remember really out of the whole series of webinars. These are the basics of project management. You want to start with your goals and your assumptions. You got to ferret out all the assumptions that you can, and you want, as best you can, a vision of the completed project, some kind of picture. What does it look like when it's done? Break it down as far as is sensible. You want bite-sized pieces. You want pieces you can accomplish. You want pieces you can estimate. You want pieces where you understand the risk at that level. You don't want to put this down to little tiny pieces just so you have stuff to check off. If they don't make sense as a task on their own, if what you come out of that with is nothing you can really put your finger on, it's just something that you did, don't do that. It's going to make your project plan long, it's going to make it complicated, and it's not going to buy you anything. Group the tasks where it's necessary. So I always go from big to small. I like to get my big tasks and then break them down further. Everybody doesn't work that way. Work the way that works best for you. If the way that works best for you is to get all those detailed ones out and then figure out how they group together, do that. That's all fine. I've shown you top down because I think more people go that direction than not. I think it's easier to conceptualize for a lot of people, but doing it the other way is just fine as long as you come up with all the details. And what people often find when they go bottoms up is once they group them, a few other things will pop out. So both of those steps are very important, but the order is not. What's important is that you do it in the order that works best for you. You're going to need to know what person or what people can complete each task, and then you actually want to know who's going to, because you have now this pool of people and you're going to make assignments. You need to know what other resources you're going to need to complete the task for a couple of reasons. One, so that you line them up, and two, if they're scarce resources, you need to schedule them in and figure out how that fits in with the whole puzzle of your project plan. You need to determine which of your tasks, now that you've got them broken down, so you don't want to do this with the big groups of tasks. You want to do it with the task breakdown. Remember, we've walked through some projects where the devil was in those details. It was the task breakdown that you really needed to use for dependencies. So figure out which tasks are dependent on which other tasks and how. Do you just have to start one before you start the other? Do you have to finish one before you start the other? Are there those time lags, like waiting for your credit union application? And that's pretty much it. And you need to execute on it. Questions? This was kind of a lot, but it's kind of review. So I'm going to wait a minute, see if anything pops up in the chat, and answer anything that you guys have. Okay, I think we're going to do our one more thing and let you know that we do have the Advanced Concepts series coming up. We'll start that in a few weeks. Again, you can do the whole thing or just one at a time. But some of the things that we're going to be covering, we'll talk about relationships and how relationship management fits in with project management, makes projects successful. We'll talk about risk, identifying risk, that's risk assessment, and managing it, making proper trade-offs. We'll talk about project communication, what kind of reporting you can do, to whom, how to make that effective. We'll talk about root cause analysis, because the first answer for why something went wrong is often not the real underlying reason. So trying to fix that first thing you found doesn't actually fix the problem. We'll talk about making it better, which is process improvement and postmortems and things like that, ways to improve your process. Systems analysis, looking at more than one project, more than one piece, how lots of pieces in systems fit together. Traditional techniques, and some of those do have this looping. Those are waterfall techniques and spiral waterfall mostly. And we'll talk about Agile at the end of that, and how Agile differs from traditional techniques and how you can apply it to things other than software, which is what it was developed for. Okay, well, I think that's it. I will send everybody the link. This will be on YouTube so that you can get to it and review it anytime you want to. You can always email me with questions. I hope to see you at our more advanced sessions. And thank you again.